Hi, everyone. My name is Helen Stott. I am a fourth-year PhD student at the Center for Computational and Integrative Biology at Rutgers, Camden. So I really didn't start out thinking that I would one day be a PhD student working in the STEM field. As an undergraduate, I wanted to study linguistics. I was interested in language, in storytelling, was particularly interested in long-form oral poetry and oral epics, and I thought I was going to go out and record bards singing oral epics in the few traditions where this still occurs. So it has been kind of a winding road for me to get to this point, but now I study developmental biology. I work on gene regulation, how genes get turned off and on during the process of development. And even though I wasn't studying this as an undergraduate, I do think that the path that takes me to this place really does start there. When I was a junior in college, I joined a neurobiology lab as a research assistant. I did it because I liked the professor and I thought it would be fun. It was a fly lab. I learned how to work with fruit flies, how to do dissections. I learned how to use some really cool microscopes. It was interesting. It was challenging. I loved the problem solving aspect of working in a lab. And that experience really colored my thinking when I graduated and I started to go out looking for jobs. And so I really went into the world thinking that, okay, well, maybe I can switch and do some research. So I started looking for research assistant type jobs or research coordinator jobs where I could work in the sciences with just my bachelor's degree. I think one of the most important things I learned during that search is if your degree and your goals don't look like they match on paper, it's really important to get yourself in front of an actual person and talk to them about what you know, what you're interested in, why you want to work in their lab. I really found out that researchers and the scientists want to talk, researchers in the sciences really want to talk to you about what they do. They're really excited when a student comes to them having read a few of their papers with questions about their work, wanting to have a conversation about the science. And it's so much easier when you get into the room and you have this conversation to show someone how much you can offer to their lab, even if you don't look precisely like the person they thought they were going to hire on paper. So I was able to do this. I was also lucky to have some people in the area I was living who could help me network, and that was also very important. And I eventually got a job as a research coordinator in a spinal cord injury lab. The lab I worked in was part of a hospital. It was very different from my lab experience as an undergraduate. I was working with human subjects, with patients, and my role was to talk to them about what research is, what it would mean to be a research participant, the kinds of studies that we were working on, and if they were interested in joining the study, then I would serve as their guide through the process of the study, introducing them to different protocols or procedures and following up with them long term. It was also a really nice introduction to all of the human components of research. Nobody does research in isolation. You need to interact with administrators. I needed to interact with doctors, with patients, with other researchers to make sure that not only was the research in my lab able to move forward, but also that the patients, the participants had a positive experience as part of the studies that we were working on. I did find working in a hospital very emotionally draining. You meet people who are at really, really difficult points in their lives, and you can't necessarily do everything you want to do to help them. And so after a couple of years working in the lab, I decided to try and look for something a little bit different. And I actually came across a maternity leave position for a high school biology teacher. I took that job and I really found out how much I loved teaching. It was so wonderful to get to introduce students to this whole amazing, cool, fascinating world of biology and to try and find students who really didn't think of themselves as scientists and show them that anybody who can ask questions can be a scientist. I loved designing curriculum. I loved building activities for my students. And I had a great time in this maternity leave placement. When my time was up, the woman who had gone on maternity leave actually decided not to return, and I had made enough connections with the department that they asked me if I would be willing to continue and take the job on full time, and I absolutely jumped at the chance. So I worked as a high school teacher for 8 years. I taught ninth through 12th grade and all different kinds of courses. One of the things my school allowed me to do was actually design new courses for the department. And it was in the process of starting to do this course design that I realized I needed more background knowledge. So I decided to get a master's in biology to help build my knowledge base and become a better teacher. I looked for master's degrees that would allow me to continue teaching full time while I was getting the degree, and I found a great program at Washington University of St. Louis that would allow me to do online coursework during the semester while I was teaching, and then go and do lab work and in-person coursework at the university over the summers. The course was specifically designed for teachers, and it had both core courses on biology and also lots of discussion of pedagogy and how to be a better teacher, and I really enjoyed that. When I was thinking about funding my master's degree, I did take out some student loans to help me fund that, but I also reached out to the school where I was working and asked them if they would be willing to subsidize my degree. And I think that was a really important question to ask. I wasn't sure about it when I went to my department chair. I thought it might be a possibility. And turns out the school was willing to fund a significant portion of my master's degree. So if you are working and looking to get a degree, it can't hurt to reach out to your company or your school or whatever it is and see if they have some kind of program to help support further education for their employees, because it was a really big financial help for me. So about 7 years into my teaching and after finishing my master's degree, I had begun designing some more advanced courses for upper level students who had finished all of the AP sciences that they could take at the school where I worked. And in particular, I had designed a developmental biology course, which was extremely hands-on, very lab-based, and I loved that course so much. I loved working with the students on it. I loved that my students asked me so many questions and I couldn't answer them. And then there were so many questions that I had that I couldn't answer about the topics that we were covering and the organisms that we were working with. And all of this was just on my mind all the time. And that's what kind of got me thinking about going back to school again and getting a PhD. When I was looking for programs, I wanted to stay local in the New Jersey or New York area to stay close to my family. And just like when I was first applying for research jobs, it was really important when I was applying for PhD programs to reach out to the labs that I wanted to work with, to the principal investigators, to the researchers whose research I thought was interesting and cool and that I might want to study in the long run. And just like before, people were really wanted to talk. I think if there's one thing that you take away from this, it should be that professors, research scientists, doesn't matter if they work at a big university or a little university, many of them, most of them in my experience, are so happy to talk about their science and what they do and what your questions are and what you're interested in. And there's no reason to be nervous about reaching out to somebody. I was super nervous when I started reaching out to people. I didn't need to be. I wish I had been less nervous at the time. Because uniformly, the people that I came across were helpful or interested, even those people who said, I don't think you're a super good fit for my lab, but maybe this is something else that you could try. They were always helpful, always willing to talk. So when you work in the STEM fields or you're trying to get a PhD in a STEM field, some programs may want you to match with a professor before you even submit an application. So that process of reaching out and finding a professor that you're interested in, who's interested in kind of bringing you into their lab is really important. Other programs might have more of a rotation process where you might work with several professors over the course of a few months and get a chance to be in their lab, meet with their students, do some work in their lab, and get a sense for whether or not you want to join and a particular lab. If you do have a program that has a rotation, really take advantage of it. So an initial conversation with the principal investigator can help you see whether or not their research interests do align with yours and whether or not you think they're a person you can easily communicate with and might be able to work with. But when you do a rotation, You also get the opportunity to actually work alongside with and really talk to all of the people who work in the lab. You get a sense of the lab culture. You get a sense of the people who are going to be your closest colleagues for maybe 4 or 5 years. And it's a really good insight into whether or not this is the place that you want to be. And that choice of lab is important because, like I said, this is 4, 5, 6 years of your life, of your work. And so it's really important to ask a lot of questions and figure out if this is where you want to be. I think that when I really started out at the beginning, some advice that I would have wanted to get is that I should be really open with my principal investigator about the kinds of experiments I want to do and the questions I want to ask and push for the kind of research that I want to do. It's something that I only started doing really in my 3rd year, and my principal investigator was really open to my ideas and was kind of waiting for me to sort of put my own stamp on the work. And prior to that, I had really been sort of taking a step back, looking for advice and instruction, and thinking that maybe my ideas weren't good enough to kind of put in front of my principal investigator. And that wasn't the case. Um, I think that, like I said, my principal investigator was waiting to see me really take ownership of my work, and I could have done it sooner. I don't think it's a problem that I did it when I did, but it was something that I did wish I had known at the beginning when I started this process. So every principal investigator and student relationship is different, but it was really a kind of revelation for me to realize that I could take control over what I wanted to study and how I wanted to study it. So hopefully this has been interesting and you've learned something that you didn't know before, but that's about all I have. And I just want to say thank you very much and good luck.